Are we lazy? Of course we are. We are lazy. It's not a thing that should surprise anybody. And when I mean by lazy, I don't mean maybe laziness born out of strength or grit and all of those type of stuff. We can definitely grab stuff. We definitely can hold different stuff. We definitely can lift stuff. Don't you see people who lift bags of beans and who lift bags of cocoa with their bare backs? You think we aren't strong in that particular way? But the sense of laziness I talk about here is laziness born out of the ways in which we tend to think, the ways in which we tend to reason, the ways in which we tend to go about living our lives, the ways in which we tend to go on, in which we tend to hold on and push further and push further, even when we know we ought not to be going that direction. Which brings the proverbial conversation about doing the same stuff every day and then expecting a different result. We as a people, first, we still hold on to the idea that we are giants of Africa, or the giants of Africa, to make use of the definitive article down there to encompass the country, and then we can be giants of Africa, sort of. But what makes for a giant? What makes for this literary device and this imprint? When you hear the idea that someone is a giant, it comes to mind that this person is huge physically, and if you want to go allegorically or you want to go connotatively, it tends to talk about wealth, the economy, the robust nature of its population. When you sit down and you think about the fact that many things have gone south, gone wrong, gone crazy, gone berserk in a place like Nigeria, you think it's a thing you are just getting to know now. You think it's a thing you are just coming to realize for yourself for the first time. But you read a bit of history, you read a bit of writings here and there, you read a bit of inquiry here and there, and you begin to ask yourself if things indeed are changing, if things have changed, if things can go well, if things can ever get better, and if we can continue like this, if we can keep quiet in the face of adversity, in the face of problems, in the face of our different realities and the likes of that. These and many other themes are the themes and concerns that should be disturbing us, that should keep us thinking, that should keep us worried, that should keep us on our toes all the time, thinking about different realities, thinking about different issues, thinking about the different problems we as a people, tend to find within ourselves, in ourselves, and in the grand scheme of things and the reality of life down here and our existence going forward. And I say this because if you continue to think about these things, it comes to bring you to that particular reality that points to the very fact that, our time down here in the world, our time as humans, it's almost like in a cycle. It's almost as though we are turning back and back and back, going forward, backwards, in and about the same conversations, because little or nothing gets to change, little or nothing change in the grand scheme of things. Things change, but not as we want them to change. Things change, not in the proportion we indeed envisage them to get to change, but they change nonetheless, and they leave us thinking about lots of stuff. They leave us thinking about things we ordinarily would not be thinking. But then we have no choice than to think about them. We have no choice than to engage in our day-to-day realities and our day-to-day encounters with themes and concerns born out of our current situation. And without wasting your time, I just want to bring to your knowledge and to your attention that particular reality that, things ought to change. And if they look as though they are not changing, it is because we're still humans and we're still within the cycle of, things being what they are and changing little or changing in no direction or in no time soon. And one begins to ask himself as a Nigerian, what should one then do? Should one just resign oneself to faith and keep quiet? Should one, equally resign oneself to the situation at hand and then just allow things to go like that. I don't see that happening anytime soon. I don't see that as a solution to our problems. I don't see that as a solution to the existential crisis we as a people have been plunged into, either willingly or not. I don't see the ways in which our lives will get better by merely looking elsewhere, by merely looking across, by merely looking outside than looking within ourselves, than looking within our own very consciousness and tell ourselves, it is left for us to make the necessary change that would see to it that our lives get better. And it is from there I draw on a lot of themes. I draw on themes such as, mediocrity. I draw on themes such as tribalism. I draw on themes, the likes of, nepotism and the likes of indiscipline, the likes of disobedience and the likes of the different forms in which we tend to see our lives and we tend to interact with our realities as Nigerians. And one of those ways we tend to do this is on the grand scheme, in and about the language we tend to use with ourselves, the lies we tell ourselves about who we are as a people. First, we still hold on to the idea that we are giants of Africa, or the giants of Africa, to make use of the definitive article down there to encompass the country, and then we can be giants of Africa, sort of. But what makes for a giant? What makes for the, this literary device and this imprint when you hear the idea that someone is a giant? It comes to mind that this person is huge physically, and if you want to go allegorically or you want to go connotatively, it tends to talk about wealth, the economy, the robust nature of its population, the robust nature of its economy, the level of education, the level of production, the level of agricultural innovation, and the level of scientific discoveries here and there that one way or the other tend to aid or should tend to aid productions going forward. These are the beliefs and these are the juxtaposition one tends to have in one's head when one thinks about the idea of, the giant of Africa. And that will be in response to the generality of the realities of other African countries. It will not just be to oneself alone, it will be in response to other countries. It will be in response to what they do, what they say, how they live their life, how they ought to live their life, how they go, how they choose not to live their life, and what's their population size, what is the population in terms of GDP, who are those who are productive, who are those who are not, how many beggars do they have, how many houses do they have, how many cars do they have, how many shoes can they ordinarily afford without going broke and going naked or going empty down there. These questions are questions that need to be answered. These are questions that we at the moment are not ready to answer. And it is in and about this I draw attention to the themes we mentioned earlier. Mediocrity. To what level of stupidity, what levels of stupidity do we see ourselves display when it comes to picking those we're supposed to pick on merit? Who are those we're supposed to pick on merit? Where's the place of meritocracy in our system? And then the next score down there will be, what are we not doing? How many mediocres do we have in our different institutions? How many mediocres do we have in our different places of work, in our different epoch of our realities? How many persons do we take cognizance of that we're not supposed to take cognizance of? How many of our brothers and sisters, the ones we tend to appoint to different places and different stratas of our governing body and the different places that make up for the economic reality of our country, how many of these people are indeed qualified and how many of them are just there because we need to put our family members there? And except a family's business wants to crumble, I don't see how we as a people would go about putting our own family's business in that kind of situation, whereby we know our brother is incompetent, we know we as a people are not competent enough to go on or carry the realities we think and we tend to tell ourselves we want to carry. And then because we want to, make everybody feel good and make everybody feel happy, we We are drawn to, how do you say it, employ people that ought not to be employed. We bring our family members that shouldn't be brought up in the first place to hold on to positions. The family is bound to corrupt, and the family's business is bound to crumble. The family's situation definitely would get worse because we would just come to a realization that we would go bankrupt. Except we have money ill-gotten, and even if we have money ill-gotten, the money would not be useful because it will not be able to multiply, it will not even sustain the family's business, except we will go about pumping in ill-gotten money or money gotten from other walks of life and other businesses into this particular situation. And if we do this, we would just continually go down and down and down and down and down and see ourselves go down and down and down until the business completely close up. No serious company would do that. No serious company would hire somebody that cannot, deliver for them. At least the basics they are paying this person for, except everybody down there is a joke, or except everybody down there is not taking their life serious or not taking their situation serious, which I want to believe everybody does, and everybody wants to take themselves serious and wants to take their own situation serious. It is something I think we all do. It is something I think we all would do if we are in a very, very terrible situation. But then what happens when it comes to the generality of our lives as a people, as Nigerians, as Africans, as people in this part of the world, the now called glorified global south? A thing I still cringe at when I hear, or when I, allow myself to come to that reality of listening to and telling myself that. And it goes to show how we as a people ought to change, and we as a people ought to do better and know better. And meritocracy and mediocrity, they're not just the two stuffs that tend to give us headaches in Nigeria, that tend to give us problems as a people, that tend to leave us confused and leave us backwards as a people. You also come to have the angle of indiscipline. Indiscipline born out of the fact that, okay, let's assume we've even tried to even give somebody who merits a particular position. What is the disposition of that person when the person resumes office and when the person takes charge and tries to, control the reins of affairs of that particular disposition? It's often seen that many people who tend to be successful, who tend to be, at least qualified, who merit certain positions, might go on to do other things, might go on to do other teams, can do other concerns, and can look at themselves as little gods, or can look at themselves as indispensable, can look at themselves as, we cannot be disposed. We are not disposable as a people, as a team, as an expert down that particular line. And so what do? We have to walk within the limits of what we have to walk at. We have to walk in the ways we want to walk at. We have to walk within the frame of reference we want to walk on. And to a particular extent, we want to actually, look at our lives and look at ourselves. And in doing that, we still see that we fall short of what we as a people ordinarily are supposed to do. We fall short of the ways in which we ought to live our lives and in which we ought to move on going forward as a species, as a people, as a state, as a country. And so when you find 10 persons being lazy, or not just even lazy, indisciplined, because being lazy is one thing, being indisciplined is another thing. Being lazy is that you cannot just walk. You cannot walk. You are just lazy. But indiscipline has to do with something that goes on to say, I have the potentiality of being hardworking. I have the chance of living right. I have the chance of living well. I have the chance of doing things right. I have the chance of living my life better. But I am not. Why? Because who cares? Why should you care? Why should you be a thing of concern for me? Why should I be a thing of concern to you, rather? Why should my case be different? Why must I live differently? Why can't I just be myself, live my way, do my things, live my life, and let everybody be in peace, and let everybody have their peace, and let everybody be who they want to be? Because who cares what I do? Who cares what I become? Who should even care the way I try to live my life and I try to position my life and my existence? And when you find people who have this disposition to themselves and to their lives and to the situation they find themselves and the generality of the situations they are in, you come to look at yourself and you begin to ask yourself, hell no, where did we get this one from? He's qualified, but where did we still get him from? How did we come about the situation that we even gave him a job? And if we are not even conscious enough, we might not even be able to know the point we brought him to be part of us. If we're not a self-conscious organization or a self-conscious state or body or nation, we would just think that's the norm. We would just think that's the way situations are. Recently, the Nigerian lawyer, Mali Dachaba, posted something on Facebook, and it has to do with the fact that in about a few days' time, the Belgian airports, the international airports will be going on strike. And the reasons they are going for this strike will still get to shock you as himself. We'll get to show clearly in this particular text, in this particular message posted on Facebook. And it goes to tell how willing we as a people come to settle for less. We as a people don't even come to know what we ought to do as a people. We don't even come to know how we ought to live our lives and how we ought to carry ourselves going forward. So that when you hear about strike in Nigeria, you cannot even imagine that the whole airport will shut down, or the airports we have from Port Harcourt to Enugu to Lagos to Abuja and to the international airports we have perched across the different parts of our country. And when these people are going on strike, they are being protected by their unions and by the different associations they get to form, and the philosophy and the laws that guide their actions and that guide their situations down there. And you ask yourself, why aren't we living like this? Why aren't we being like this? Why aren't we living in such dispensation whereby we can tell ourselves and say, this particular thing we are doing, we ought to change, we ought to make progress, we ought to be better, we can do better, we can bring about the welfare of our different bodies and the different sectors that see to it that our country get to grow. We don't. Which also brings about the conversations about laziness. Are we lazy? Of course we are. We are lazy. It's not a thing that should surprise anybody. And when I mean by lazy, I don't mean maybe laziness born out of strength or grit and all of those type of stuff. We can definitely grab stuff. We definitely can hold different stuff. We definitely can lift stuff. Don't you see people who lift bags of beans and who lift bags of cocoa with their bare backs? You think we aren't strong in that particular way? But the sense of laziness I talk about here is a laziness born out of the ways in which we tend to think, the ways in which we tend to reason, the ways in which we tend to go about living our lives, the ways in which we tend to go on, in which we tend to hold on and push further, even when we know we ought not to be going that direction. Which brings the proverbial conversation about doing the same stuff every day and then expecting a different result. Because that's what we tend to do. That's what we want to tell ourselves that we ought to be doing. The idea born out of the fact that we want to do the same stuff that doesn't give us a benefit or doesn't give us a good result, and yet we want to continue doing it. But one way or the other, we expect that things will change. We expect that things will get better. We expect that things will go well. We expect that things will go fine. I don't see that happening now. I don't see that happening tomorrow. I don't see that happening anytime soon. I don't see that happening in our lives. I don't see that happening anywhere. I don't see that happening anytime soon. I don't see that happening going forward. I don't see that happening in our lives now into the future. And I say this for a reason. I say this for a concern that we as a people might not even be looking at. And this concern is born out of the fact that it affects everybody. This sense of laziness affects both the strong, both the willing, those with the strength, those with the desire, the zeal, and the grit to move the nation forward, those in between. It affects everybody. It affects everybody. Remember, no man is an island. No man is an island in and about of himself. For whom does the bell toll? It tolls for all of us. It tolls for you. It tolls for me. It tolls for everybody. It tolls for all of us. It tolls for you and I. It tolls for the generality of our lives. It tolls for everybody. What goes wrong in Ogwashuku affects somebody in Lagos. What goes wrong in Kano affects somebody in Kaduna. What goes wrong in Kaduna affects somebody in Abuja. What goes wrong in Abuja affects another person in Enugu, one way or the other. So that if the North decides to be lazy, the South will suffer from it. In terms of the supply chain, if the North refuses to produce what it's supposed to produce and the South continues to be milked to feed the North and their desired interest in and about that, the South continues to be milked. It continues to suffer. It continues to go down the way it continues to go. Ways it's not supposed to go. It continues to go down and go down and go down. What about corruption? We know the definition already, that it is a cankerworm that has eaten deep into the fabrics of the Nigerian people. But what do we even mean by it as it is this cankerworm that has eaten deep into the fabric of the Nigerian society? Where did it start from? What are we doing to address it? Is everybody just waiting for the fan to turn and face their direction, as opposed to doing something, as opposed to acting out, as opposed to being responsible enough to know what to do, when to do it, how to do it, what to do, what not to do, what to allow out, what to put in, and the conversations thereafter, or the conversations thereof, or the conversation in between the spaces and the hyphens that bring about the reality of the situation at hand. We say WAEC is corrupt. We say JAM is corrupt. We say universities are corrupt. We say the ministries we have are corrupt. We say the officials that handle these projects are corrupt. We say a lot of things and we accuse a lot of persons about corruption. Rightly so, if our accusations hold water and if our accusations are worth the time. But what happens when we fail to really act? Do we just talk and 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 expect change to happen? Do we just speak and 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 expect things to turn around and become better? Do we just go about living our lives the way we get to live our lives and live the way we get to live our lives and live that way and live that way and live that way and hope that one way or the other things would get better? Is that what we want to do? Is that how we want to live our lives? Is that how we should even be going? Is that how we ought to go? Is that what we must do as a people? And I ask these questions because it is important that we ask ourselves these questions. What do we want to see in our lives, and how do we want to see ourselves grow? Strong, tall, muscular, or we just want to see ourselves wane and we just want to see ourselves die? Are we not tired of being called a corrupt nation? It's not even as if we're even that corrupt. It is the fact that we've not even learned the drills of how real corrupt nations get to function. It is that we've not even learned what it means to even have soft power. It is because we've not even learned a lot of simple things and a lot of simple situations that can even still allow us to be corrupt and even want to even be successful. We do this job badly. We learn from people and then we take it to a new height. We learn corruption from the West. We learn different stuff from them in the scale we come to have them now. And we turn it into a full-time business. Which country wants to survive when it is corrupt? How will a country survive when its people are not responsible enough to know that the leaders ought to be punished as well as the young ones? And if leaders and those in high places placed there by our government and all that are there, we as a people ought to hold them accountable. And when they fall and they get punished, we get to also learn that we also can be punished when we go wrong, and we also can be punished when we do things wrongly. But no, we don't. We don't see it that way. We don't have that at the back of our mind. We don't see ourselves in these realities. What we do and how we see ourselves as this, large expanse of, land, or how we have been told that we are just a geographical expression and we live it in and about there. But Nigeria would always be home for you, for me, for everybody. We ought to take it seriously. We ought to take it seriously. How else do you want to live life? How else do you want to go on without having the tag of being a Nigerian? Even if you get to renounce your citizenship and you tend to cling on to other nationalities, they will still remind you when the time comes that what it takes to be from a place goes beyond just having the idea that I want to change who I am. Just the same way you think you can just change a gender or change your sexuality and take on something completely new. You will be reminded at a point, and you'll be asked the same way trans women and trans men are being asked, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be a Nigerian? What does it mean to be an Afro-German or a Nigerian-German man or doctor or engineer or nurse? A British Tanzanian or a Tanzanian British, whichever war power tends to put its own name first. And all of this still goes back to the same conversation. Things will only change when we want them to change. Things will only change when we want to see them change. Things will only change when we need them to change. Things will only change when we as a people stop employing mediocres, when we as a people stop employing family members that cannot actually do the job, when we stop employing people that shouldn't be there, our friends, our family members, even those we don't know, when we stop condoning corruption, when we stop condoning nepotism and tribalism and look at meritocracy for what it is and look at justice and excellence and look at in and about all the virtues that should see a country go forward, and also come to beef up our international presence and come to beef up our sense of geopolitics and our sense of geopolitical reasonings and the different positionings that we can position ourselves. Unless we begin to do these stuffs, unless we begin to look at these things for what they are, we labor in vain. We labor in vain. We labor and we head nowhere. It doesn't happen. No society just change overnight. They give themselves chance and they give themselves time, and they work at their situation to make their situations better. It doesn't just come by God's giving. It doesn't come by God's positioning and all that. It comes by we realizing that we can use the geography we've been given to influence our fate. We can use the desert, we can use the mangrove, we can use the south, we can use the creeks, we can use the sand dunes and the different situations we find ourselves, the Sahara, the Gulf, the Atlantic, and all we have within us to make sense of our lives now into the future. Outside of this, I don't see how we will come to break off this cycle. I don't see how we are going to break out. And I say this with all sense of seriousness, and I say this with all sense of appreciation that you've listened to me up until this time. May Nigeria succeed in our lifetime. May Africa grow. May the world come to have peace. I am Biringkpa in Mecca. I am your brother. See you next time.